Now, Uncle Jim and Uncle Bill weren't much for in contests, and they never brought tickets and that. They didn't play bingo or chase that old ace, and for card games they'd only play scat. But when young Nancy Buckle showed up at Jim's shed, selling tickets on some kind of a prize, they couldn't say no to the 10-year-old girl who was family to both of the boys. $20 was the price. Jim dug in his pockets till he finally came up with a 10. Bill found the rest in an old Target can with some 22 bullets, and then they asked the young maid what the ticket was on. She said 'twas some kind of a car. A new truck would be good, Bill hopefully said. Sure, mine was new back in the war. After young Nancy left, the boys looked at the ticket, but neither one had on their glasses. Jim said, "What's a Ferrari?" Bill said he didn't know, but it sounded a bit like molasses. About 2 months later, Jim picked up his phone. 'Twas a fellow who talked kind of queer. Turned out the boys had won the big prize. "I will bring the car to you there." "That's all very good," Jim said to himself, and he called Bill to tell him the news. "Automatic?" asked Bill. "I don't care too much, but standard's not good for Sue's." Then the boys got excited, and they figured for sure that a new F-150 was theirs, and since it was free, they'd use it for into their camp and for checking their snares. When the day finally came for the prize to arrive, they stood in Jim's driveway and talked, and all of a sudden a queer little motor car pulled in the driveway and stopped. 'Twas all kind of squat, like a touting, I suppose, and the boys weren't over impressed, but they tried to look happy when the driver got out. After all, now he was their guest. His name was Giuseppe, and he seemed right excited as he handed the keys to the boys. Jim said, "Yes, boy." Bill tried to look happy and said, "Well, what a surprise." Giuseppe took off. Jim started to laugh. Bill stood there shaking his head. "I suppose we could change a few things here and there so she won't be so useless," he said. They drove her inside Jim's garage and came up with a bit of a plan. Jim had all the tools to make her at least half as good as his old 12 Elan. First thing they did was swap out the tires for some old ones Jim had in his store. They came off a tractor, and with those on, they figured she'd clear all the stumps now for sure. The motor was small for what they had in mind, so they scrapped it and put in another, a great big V8 from an old Cadillac Jim had won on a bet with his brother. Jim had an old 8-track he kept on his shelf, and he'd sit there and listen to Merle, Hank Sr. and Kitty and Waylon and Willie, Loretta and Lester and Earl. He mounted the unit on top of the dash with stove bolts and an old rabbit snare, then jammed half a clothespin in with a tape till the music came out nice and clear. He rigged up a rack for his 12-gauge, an old 30-30 that looked pretty good. A nice set of antlers was mounted with wires through holes that he punched in the hood. There was nowhere to carry a load to their camp, nowhere for Jim's 12 Elan, so they cut off the back of the car with a torch and made a good spot for a pan. Jim had some lumber from the roof of his store that wasn't too beat up or tarry, so they made up a pan for the back of the modified pickup Ferrari. "Hold on now," said Jim, "I got just the thing to make her all perfect and nice." He looked in some boxes and came up with a set of those oversized pink furry dice. Well, the boys used the Ferrari for a while at the wood, and they used her for hunting Bill's moose, but it wasn't too long before first gear wore out and the others got sloppy and loose. She'd still hook in the stumps, and a half-quart of wood was about all the wood she could carry, and the boys finally figured there wasn't much use for a modified pickup Ferrari. So they called up Giuseppe and said thanks a lot, but perhaps he should come take her back. When he saw what they'd done, he made a strange sound, and he fell on the floor with a crack. He came to in a while, and the boys picked him up, and they noticed a tear in his eye. Jim dusted him off. Bill said, "There's no charge, and there's no need to thank us, my boy."